Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today, it is finally time to take a look at the bracket for the OWCS finals. They'll be kicking off here tomorrow with the 8 teams underway competing for that grand finals win. So, we're going to take a look at the bracket. I'll give you my predictions, what I think is going to happen, why, all that fun stuff. So, before we share my bracket, let's just take a look at the overall just blank bracket with all 8 teams. You can get a look at where things are going, so you can kind of have your own little thought on the bracket before we get into my picks. But you can see round 1, we have Team Falcons taking on Twisted Minds, that Saudi Arabian organization showdown. Space Station taking on Nightmare, Crazy Raccoon taking on NRG Shock, and Toronto Defiant looking to get their revenge against ENCE for that defeat from back in Dallas. So those are your 8 teams. That's who's going to be competing. Let's now show my bracket where you can see my picks on what I think is going to happen in this tournament. So we're going to start, of course, with the upper bracket, and then we'll run through the lower bracket after that. But no real shock here, I think. Maybe there's a couple games where you could maybe kind of go either way, but Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon get some pretty easy games to open up their schedule here. They both, the 2 Korean teams have dominated all year, go up against the 3 seeds coming out of EMEA in North America, so all in all, I think it should be a pretty easy game for both of those teams there. So I'm taking Falcons to beat Twisted Minds. That one I don't think will be particularly close. Obviously, it's first of 2 in this upper bracket first round, so we'll see if there's anything interesting there. Space Station versus Nightmare, I think, is probably the best game here in the opening round. I do like both of these teams. I think there's a lot of things to like about these 2 teams. I think Space Station looks to be a little bit better right now, if not a lot better. We haven't seen Nightmare really play at the highest of levels in the kind of international circuit. They haven't really been as strong, and they haven't really kind of had that same overall kind of great performance. Whether or not this means anything to you, Space Station and Nightmare were in the same group for Esports World Cup, and Space Station was victorious over Nightmare. So, it's been a while since then. These 2 teams have met before. It has just been a little while since that happened. But we'll see what goes on here, but I do like what this team is. And Nightmare's shown to be pretty good, but I just think Space Station right now is in a better position. I think they continue to look good. This is, I think, the best meta for Space Station, a rush-based composition that they can really, really excel in. So I give them the edge over Nightmare somewhat convincingly, but, I could be proven wrong there. Crazy Raccoon over Energy Shock. I think Energy Shock right now might be the weakest team going into this tournament. Crazy Raccoon really, really good. I'm excited to see Energy Shock with everybody finally on, low ping, not having to deal with having players playing on high ping from Korea. But we'll see. It's a I think it looks like, more than anything else, a game that could be very, very, very one-sided and a pretty quick 2 maps in favor of Crazy Raccoon. And then you have Defiant versus ENCE. Right now, I feel a little bit better about Defiant. This game could be close as well, much like Space Station Nightmare could be close. I think when you look at what those 2 teams have been able to do this year, obviously ENCE, a really good 2 seed coming out of EMEA. They've been very good all year. They've been consistent. Defiant did not have a great showing in Dallas. I think they've looked a lot better since then. Obviously, look at what they did in the Esports World Cup. You look at what they were able to do in North America. I don't love this meta for them. I don't think it's their best meta, and that is one of the things that I think could allow ENCE to get the upset victory here. But I just have not been... I just don't get the feeling that ENCE is playing the best version of the team. I don't think this is the best version of ENCE. I don't think we're seeing the best version of ENCE, and so I think right now I give the edge to the Defiant to win that game. But then, unsurprisingly, I'm taking the Korea sweep with Falcons and Crazy Raccoon winning out over Space Station and Toronto Defiant. I just think they're the two better teams. I still think they're the two best teams in the world. Until somebody else beats them, I am not going to pick anybody to beat them because they've been that good, that consistent all year. They are, simply put, dominant. In every game they play. Internationally, they've been dominant. They've been dominant when they don't, basically outside of the Korean teams, they dominate everybody. And even in Korea, they dominate a bunch of those teams. So I just don't really think they're in a position right now to lose to teams that just have not shown their the capability to win at that level against these two teams in particular. Yes, the Defiant did get a win over Zeta Division in Esports World Cup. That is a huge win for them. That is one of those things that you circle as a really notable victory where they were able to get that win. They took a map off Crazy Raccoon in the finals for that one. But I just don't see them right now as the team able to win that game. And as good as Space Station is, and this is a good meta for them, I think they could get an upset win against the Falcons team, which the majority of this Falcons roster, to be fair, is the exact roster that Space Station, or most of the same roster that Space Station beat in the Overwatch League playoffs last year when, SSG was London and Team Falcons, a lot of the core of that roster was the Atlanta Reign. So there's potential for it, but I just don't see it happening. I just think you have to roll with the two top teams in the world right now, and that's Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon. Picking them to go to the upper bracket final. I'm going to take Falcons in the upper bracket final. They won more recently, and based on what I think is going to happen in this is the result I'm going to have to predict, and we'll talk about it when we get to the grand final. But that's your upper bracket final. I don't want to talk too much about those two teams because they're going to meet again in my grand final, and I can talk about them then. Let's jump back now to the lower bracket, where the losers of the first round games will meet here. So you have Twisted Minds losing to Team Falcons, taking on Nightmare, who lose to Space Station Gaming. I feel very much more confident in Nightmare in this one. I will say, I say very much, this is a game that interests me quite a lot because of what Twisted Minds is as a team. They're a very different team. They're a very unique team that plays a style that a lot of the players on Nightmare are not going to be as familiar with as you do with teams in EMEA who've seen some of these players before, who've seen this team before. Nightmare hasn't, and so I think there is a world where Twisted Minds can roll up in their kind of Widow Farah look and really just kind of throw Nightmare for a loop and just not have them be ready to deal with it. But I really like what Nightmare's put together. I just think they've been a really good team the second half of the year. I think we've seen just how good they are as a whole. And I think this is a meta that is really, really good for them. They pushed the Defiant. It was a 3-2 loss and a 4-3 loss for Nightmare. Both times they played the Defiant in Stage 4. We're seemingly in basically the same meta here. So I just think they should be favored to win over a Twisted Minds team that has looked good against the kind of mid-level competition in EMEA and has looked competitive with some of the top-level competition. But it's been so long since they've been better than the likes of SSG, better than the likes of ENCE, and I actually think Nightmare versus SSG will be a pretty close series. So to me, by that logic, you kind of have to go with Nightmare. But it's not a guarantee by any means, because what Twisted Minds does is so different, and they like to run this style that you're not going to see in a lot of places. They have potential to steal a win away from Nightmare just for that reason alone. Then Energy Shock taking on ENCE. As much as I like Energy Shock, and I do really like this team, I like what we've seen out of them this year, I just don't think they are consistent enough to beat ENCE. The benefit that ENCE has at the end of the day, and it's the thing to me that's kind of the difference maker against the Defiant, which I didn't really bring up in that game, but ENCE at the end of the day has some very good players. When you have one of the best tanks in Europe and two of the best DPS players in Europe and some very good support players, that really elevates your team. When you're playing against the Defiant, I don't think that edge really sticks around when you're playing against RuPaul and Vega, who are, an equal level, if not better, support line. That one's definitely up for debate. That's probably the closest. But then you have Sugarfree and Merit, who are phenomenal in the DPS role, who can rival, if not, I think Merit's better than Kai right now, and I think Sugarfree and Kevster pretty close. And you have someone who's arguably the best individual tank player in the world. And I think that is one of the reasons why you can give Defiant the edge. Against Energy Shock, I think ENCE probably has the edge roll for roll, except for maybe Flex Support. I do really like Ultraviolet. I think Ultraviolet is a phenomenal player who I would take over Skyripa at this point in time. But outside of that, yeah, I think Vistola has looked better than Kellen has looked this year. I certainly think Kevster and Kai have had a better year overall than the Shock damage line. And I really, really, really like what we've seen. I don't think that Rakadak has looked amazing. I'm notoriously kind of a Kelix hater, but I think he's looked good in ENCE. I think the team has looked much better than I expect them to with him in the roster. So I just think ENCE has a more of an edge in the roster. They have players who've been around longer. They've played together for longer. I think their core is a little bit more solid. And I really like what they've done. And I think Energy Shock are still a young team that hasn't really reached the peak that they're potentially going to reach. So I take ENCE to take that one away just because they are the better team overall this year. And I think you have to favor them in this one. This would set up two incredible lower bracket quarterfinals games. A Toronto Defiant versus Nightmare rematch and a Space Station versus ENCE rematch. I'll start with Space Station versus ENCE just because I think this game is a little more straightforward. I think that you look at the recent history between these two teams. Yes, ENCE did beat SSG in the upper bracket finals in Stage 4, but the Grand Finals was an SSG victory, and the Grand Finals in the Face It Masters for EMEA was a Space Station victory. This meta is the same meta. It favors them more. This is their bread and butter. This is where they're the best. When you need those really good coaching decisions, Space Station has the edge in coaching. They have been playing together for years. This team trusts each other so well. And I think, with the addition of KSA, and this is something I really mentioned in my primer video, which you didn't see that. You really should check that out. I meant to mention that at the beginning of this video, and I forgot. But if you didn't watch it, you should check it out. Be linked in the description, be linked in the cards, linked to the end of this video. Watch it. I talk about the teams a little more depth. But in that video, I highlighted the fact that Space Station, I think, made a very strong roster addition when they brought in KSA because it makes them a little bit more flexible. They can play things like the Sigma-based compositions on a map like Circuit Royale, and they can play it with a very good Sigma player in KSA who just elevates the team in that way, and they have that flexibility to be able to play more things that they couldn't really play when they just had Hottie in, because as good as Hottie is on heroes like Reinhardt, or he can play Arisa, he can play Ram, he can play Winston. When he moves off of those rush comps, when he moves off of Reinhardt in particular, you see a drop in play. It's not to say that he can't play those other heroes, but he is very clearly he is so good on Reinhardt that when you can force that, or you can force a rush composition in general, the team just looks better. I think with the way they look now, they're a lot more flexible. I think ENCE is in a bit more of a rough spot with their coaching changes and all that type of stuff, that I really like what SSG has done. They've been better against ENCE, especially in kind of these tournament games, than other teams have been. So to me, they are the favorites in this tournament. When it comes to the EMEA teams, I think they're the best right now, and I will pick them for this one. Toronto Defiant versus Nightmare. I really want to pick Nightmare to win this game. I actually had Nightmare at first, but I changed it. Because I just think you have to go with Toronto. Kind of similarly, like Nightmare, as good as they've been against Toronto, they haven't beaten them yet this year at all. They've come very close several times, but they haven't been able to do it yet. So if you want to be able to win this game, I got to be able to see it, right? And as much as I would like to see Nightmare get over that hump, I think that Defiant have just looked better this year. I also really want to see a Defiant versus Space Station match. We haven't gotten to see that at all this year, despite the fact that they're kind of like the two most notable teams coming out of, both of their regions. It's the kind of matchup that I think fans want to see. I think fans would love to see NA versus EMEA, the best of the best, go head-to-head in a, kind of winner gets to take on Korea and maybe get that shot to go to the grand finals. I think a lot of people want that game. I want that game. And so I think the Defiant should be the favorite to win this game. I certainly think this will be a close game. Nightmare pushes the Defiant very, very far. And I think that's part of the reason why that is a big thing that could hurt the Defiant in a match against this SSG, is just that extra layer of having to play two games like that back-to-back. We'll see, but I do like what Defiant have done this year. They've been better. They have not lost a Nightmare yet this year. This would be the perfect opportunity to get that upset over to the Defiant and send them home early and basically get to kind of go home at the end of this tournament and say it doesn't matter if we didn't win any of NA. We were the team that beat the Defiant in the playoffs. We're the team that prevented them from getting that big money in the playoffs. We're the team that spoiled their ability to play SSG. It would be a great storyline, but I am gonna side with Defiant in this one just because they've been the better team this year, and no reason I think to expect any different right now until I have seen enough to convince me that that's the case. This would set up the Defiant taking on Space Station. I think certain metas would be much better for the other. And this is an instance where I think Space Station benefits from the meta. If this was a dive meta, if we were seeing a lot of Winston or Diva, even Diva would be pretty good for SSG with the way that KSA plays. But if it was like a hard Winston meta, for example, I think Defiant would look a lot better. If it was like a Wrecking Ball meta, I think the Defiant would look a lot better. I just think with the way this meta is, rush-heavy compositions are the bread and butter of Space Station. It's what they run the best. It's where they look the most comfortable. I think you have to favor them against the Defiant. It's not the Defiant are bad. I just think SSG have been better in general. It's a very good match. Two teams that are both really, really good. And it's one of those games, like, I want to see it for this reason, because they're just two top-level teams. They're the best teams coming out of their region. They haven't played yet this year. We know Korea is going to win this tournament. If they don't, it'll be a huge upset. So I want to get that NA versus EMEA hate match, grudge match, where it's really for the best in the West title. And I don't think you can have that if you don't get to have the Defiant and SSG go up against each other. So that's what I want for this one. So hopefully we do get that game, and I'm going to take SSG in that one. Maybe it's the home crowd buff. I don't know, but I just think they've looked better in this meta than the Defiant have. They were super dominant in that win over Ents in the finals. Defiant had to kind of fight for it. So maybe I'm just looking at the results a little too much, but I just think Space Station looks better. That sets up Space Station to take on Crazy Raccoon in lower bracket final, which I believe was also the lower bracket final in Dallas. But yeah, hate to break it to you, SSG, your run-ins there again. I think Crazy Raccoon's got your number. I think they're going to win and set up a rematch with Team Falcons in the grand final. Crazy Raccoon's so good. I mean, they began the second half of the year going through the entire Korea regular season without dropping a map, right? Like, wow, they didn't get first place in Korea. All of a sudden, they're doomed. No, they're not. They're totally fine. They're going to be fine, and I think they're going to quite easily make their way to the grand finals, whether that be by beating Team Falcons or beating whoever they have to beat through the lower bracket. I don't think it's that much of a challenge. And then we get the Team Falcons Crazy Raccoon Grand Finals rematch, as we continue to get pretty much every single stage. And I think this is a very interesting one to look at because of the way the meta has evolved, obviously. Last time these two teams played, it was in seemingly a similar meta than what we're getting in this tournament. It was Team Falcons that won in the Grand Finals. It was Crazy Raccoon that won in the Upper Bracket Finals. I'm flipping it here. Part of the reason why I'm flipping it is just because every time these teams play in a tournament, I think every time they've played this year, there might be one tournament that isn't the case, but the team that wins the Upper Bracket Final loses in the Grand Final. I don't know why that's the case. It has just happened. I'm pretty sure all of their tournaments so far this year, all of their Upper Bracket Finals and their Grand Finals matches, so that's why I'm taking Falcons to win the Upper Bracket and Crazy Raccoon to win the Lower Bracket. It's just a thing that has happened, and so I'm not gonna argue with history. But I really like what Crazy Raccoon improved upon throughout the stage. I think once the playoffs hit and the meta changed, Falcons clearly was more comfortable. It helped them, and they benefited a lot more. There's been so much time for Crazy Raccoon to improve and get better. Obviously, the same goes for Team Falcons, but at the end of the day, I think Crazy Raccoon's been the better team this year. Consistently, they've been the better team all year. And so, I think when you look at a meta like this, I'm supposed to sit here and go, yeah, but at the end of the day, Team Falcons is still the better team in this meta. Well, I think it's a game of inches, and Team Falcons was able to get over that extra inch they needed last time they played. And I just don't think they get it this time. I think Crazy Raccoon gets it. I mentioned this as well in the primer video, but something about these Sombra changes is really, really sticking out to me. We did see some Sombra get played in the most recent meta. I know Seeker on Nightmare played quite a bit of Sombra. He also obviously played a lot of Cassidy. It's not like he only played Sombra, but we were seeing Sombra get played in the last meta when, before her kind of changes came through. And I really think Sombra is a super lethal version of the character right now. She can put in a lot of damage. She can be a really effective, murderer, basically, of your backline, of whoever you have. And when you have Lip, who is the single best Sombra to ever play the game, there is a world where we see very specifically a Lip Sombra composition that is really difficult for Team Falcons to overcome. And so just with those kinds of things in mind, I'm running my head through everything. I really think this is the meta where Crazy Raccoon is able to take that little inch that they were behind and flip it in their favor and kind of find their version of the composition that they can turn to overcome what Team Falcons is able to succeed against them with back in Stage 2. It's not like it was a massacre and now Crazy Raccoon's playing from behind the 8-ball. It was close, and I think now they have the means to turn it in their favor, and I'm excited for this one. I do think Crazy Raccoon has just been the best team all year. I think there's a reason why you look at this team this year. They've been so consistently good and so consistently strong. I struggle to look at them and go, yeah, no, they're not going to win this tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if Team Falcons wins. It's one of those two teams. I think it's like a 50-50 chance. It's one of those weird stats where it's like, I would say that there is a 99% chance that one of those two teams wins. To me, it feels like almost impossible for another team to win. Maybe a 90% chance. But it's super one-sided for those two teams in particular, and then it comes down to who you pick. But I like Crazy Raccoon. I think they've been better as a whole this year. And I think they walk away from this one with the dub of the tournament and walk away from 2024 as the best team in Overwatch. So there you go. That is my bracket predictions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you think it's going to be Crazy Raccoon? Do you think it's going to be Team Falcons? Or are you riding with NA or EMEA that they're actually going to get the upset? It's going to be their time, and we're all just wrong. Maybe you're right. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that's going to be all from me for today. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. Your support does help out a lot with the channel. But that's going to be all from me for today. Thank you all once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.